Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. The following is an email we received from a man in Ireland and his lifelong experience with aliens. Paul K. didn't want us to use his full surname for fear that it may affect his career. At the time of the first incident in the 1970s, Paul was about 7 years old and was living in the village of Maynooth in County Kildare, about 54 kilometres from Dublin. One morning he woke up to a loud noise around 7 a.m. The room was light as it was summer, and as he lay in bed he could feel a presence at his bedroom door. He then saw the door slowly open and felt an immediate paralysis over his entire body. He said it was a strange and scary experience, and he felt frozen in time. He was fully aware of what was occurring in his room, and there was no sound whatsoever. Paul's eyes were fixed on the bedroom door, as if he was expecting something to happen, but he was not exactly sure what. The only thing he felt certain of was that he was not going to like it. The door slowly opened, and he could see what looked like small grey beings entering the room. They came in 2 pairs to each side of his bed, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. Both were standing beside each other, but for some strange reason he felt no fear. It was like he was expecting them, and seemed strangely familiar. They moved up and down each side of his bed and appeared almost mechanical, with the heads bobbing up and down, then moving from side to side. They then moved to the end of his bed beside the bedroom door, standing in single file as if waiting for something. Then a dark figure entered the room, who looked to be about 2.5 metres tall. The taller being appeared to be giving instructions to the smaller beings. There was still no sound, but looking at the tall being made Paul feel very uneasy, and he was starting to panic. The large being quickly pointed at Paul, and the smaller beings moved to the side of the bed, 2 on each side, and grabbed his arms, and began lifting him out of the bed. At this stage Paul was petrified, and tried to scream, but no sound came out. He then went unconscious, and later woke up in bed. After the experience, he could not function or go to school for a few days. He felt that this had happened on numerous occasions. In 1991, when Paul was about 17, he was living in the town of Greystones in County Wicklow, about 63 kilometres from where his previous alien experience had taken place in Maynooth. Paul was coming home after visiting his girlfriend in the nearby town of Kilcool. He planned to catch the last bus home, but beforehand he visited a local garage which was still open and purchased some batteries for his Walkman, as he planned to listen to some music on the way home. He caught the last bus home that was empty, and outside was cold, dark and wet. As the bus arrived at his stop, he exited and started to walk up the long dark lane towards his home, which was in an estate just beyond a narrow laneway. The walk was about 3 minutes at most. He put his Walkman back on and proceeded up the dark, poorly lit road. As he was listening to his music and was about 100 metres from the laneway and an old church to his right, his Walkman started to slow down and then stop. He thought it strange, as he'd just purchased new batteries, so it couldn't be that. He stopped and looked down to check his Walkman and opened the battery compartment and saw that the batteries were secured. Then he checked the tape cassette and it appeared to be undamaged. He then sensed something was happening on his right-hand side and slowly turned his head, and what he saw left him in total disbelief. He was observing a clear sphere, about 20 metres in diameter, with 2 glass cylinders coming out of the sphere's upper right-hand side. The sphere was neon purple in colour, and looked the same colour as a neon purple in the butcher shop windows at night. He watched the sphere rise slowly into the night sky. He couldn't move, and was not sure if it was because he was petrified or whether it was holding him there. He could not believe what he was seeing. The sphere then rose to about 30 feet and sped off and was gone in an instant. He then looked into the dark courtyard of the old church and could see a large black dog sitting there looking directly at him. Suddenly he was able to move and was so frightened at what he had just witnessed that he ran the rest of the way home, but then sensed that something was watching and following him. It was raining hard as he reached the front door as he fumbled to find the correct key. He then opened the front door and ran inside without looking behind and felt instant relief. He walked into the kitchen, still breathing heavily and trying to come to terms with what he had just encountered. He then heard his father's voice from the living room, who was watching late-night TV. His father asked if everything was okay, as he looked frightened. Paul said he was fine and was going to bed. He didn't want to tell his father, as he'd always been strict and condescending, and telling him was not worth the hassle. He took his jacket off and walked up the stairs to his bedroom. He entered the room and could hear the rain hitting the bedroom window. He was still thinking about what had happened and felt the urge to look behind the curtains, which were closed. As he opened the curtains, he looked out towards the driveway that led up to their house. And as he looked down, he gasped as he saw the big black dog with his eyes looking directly at him at his bedroom window. He immediately shut the curtains and jumped into bed, terrified. He could not sleep that night. The following night, he went to bed extremely tired because he hadn't slept the previous night. During the night, he woke up and felt he was not in his bed. The bed felt cold and hard like a table. He opened his eyes and looked around and found he was in a very large room that echoed with noises. The room was dimly lit and he could see other tables with dim lights over them, with tall figures appearing to be moving from table to table. The figures began to move towards him and he closed his eyes. He sensed that something was standing over him and felt this entity was looking directly into his face, watching to see if it would open his eyes. Paul lay there with his eyes so tightly shut that it was hurting him. He thought that if he opened his eyes, he would never be seeing home again, and also had the distinct feeling that this had happened many times before, and all he needed to do was keep his eyes closed. He soon fell into unconsciousness and woke the next morning feeling relieved but a little strange. He walked downstairs to the kitchen where he met his mother. He asked her if she'd like a coffee, as he was having one. As he switched on the kettle, he noticed that his mother looked a little unsettled, with a confused look on her face. He asked her if she was all right, and she said she was fine. As he was making coffee, he said that something really strange happened last night, but for some reason she did not want to hear about it. She told him that it appears to be a mourning for strange things, as she had been visiting the old lady next door, and the lady told that she thinks she's losing her mind. Last night, as she was sitting on a bed combing her hair, she saw 6 little grey men floating by her window, who moved very slowly, and she could clearly see and count them. Her bedroom window next door was close to Paul's bedroom window. After hearing the story about his elderly neighbour, he told his mother what had happened during the night, and she took a while to take in his story. She believed him but told him not to tell anyone. Paul said that he was absolutely sure of one thing. Despite the many stories and documentaries saying these visitors are our friends and are here to help us, Paul knew from his experience that his visitors were not friendly but malevolent. Now in his early 50s, Paul said that he'd never told the story in public or even to his wife. He claimed that what had happened to him were as lucid today as they were all those years ago. He said that he'd always looked at life in a logical manner, but had absolutely no explanation for what's been happening to him since his first experience. He thought about hypnosis, but felt it was better not to know. He wished that none of it had ever happened to him, and wouldn't wish it on his worst enemy. However, he was relieved that he was finally able to tell his story.